Christmas shopping. From Jan Struther's Mrs. Miniver. One of the minor arts of life, thought Mrs. Miniver at the end of a long day's Christmas shopping, was the conservation of energy in the matter of swing doors. With patience and skillful timing it was very seldom necessary to use your strength on them. You could nearly always follow close behind some masterful person who had already done the pushing, and if you were too late for that and the door had begun to swing towards you, then it was well worth pausing for a second until it swung away again and needed only a gentle encouragement. This seemed obvious enough, but there was an astounding number of people who seemed to glory in taking the line of most resistance, hurling themselves against an approaching door and reversing its direction by brute force, as though there were virtue in the fact. They must lead, she reflected, very uncomfortable lives. Placing herself neatly in the wake of a bull-necked woman in tweeds, she slipped out of the shop. There was a raw wind. Sleety rain was beginning to fall, blurring the lamplight. The pavements were steel sleek. It was settling down into one of those nasty wet evenings which the exiled Londoner longs for with a quite unbearable nostalgia. She tumbled all her parcels into the back of the car, slid, happy but exhausted, into the driving seat, and set off for home. The double screen wiper wagged companionably, uttering over and over again the same faint wheedling word, which she could never quite make out. It was a dissyllable, something like receive or bequeath. She was glad, at any rate, that they now had a screen wiper which moved at a constant speed. Their last had been one of those which work off induction, lively and loquacious when you are at a standstill, sulky and slow as soon as you get going and really need its help, like the very worst type of human being. She felt a little guilty. It was the first time she had caught herself comparing the beloved old car unfavorably in any way with the usurping new one. Getting home was evidently going to be a long job. The usual 6 o'clock home-going stream was in spate with Christmas crowds, and Oxford Street was a solid jam. It was her own fault, she had to admit, as she sat back and waited for the lights to change. Every year the same thing happened. At the beginning of November she made up her mind that this time, for once, she would get her Christmas shopping done early. She went as far as writing out a list, and there, for several weeks, the matter rested. At intervals she tried to pretend that Christmas Day fell on the 5th of December, or, alternately, that all her friends and relations lived in South Africa and that she had to catch an early mail. But it was no use. The feeling of temporal urgency cannot be artificially produced, any more than the feeling of financial distress. The young man who determines to work his way around the world may gain many things, but the experience of poverty is not one of them. He knows that in the ultimate emergency he can always cable home for funds, and Mrs. Miniver knew perfectly well that Christmas was not until the 25th of December, and that all the people on her list lived in England. The screen wiper wagged steadily. "See green, see green." Perhaps that was nearer the mark? Besides, successful present-choosing depends very largely upon the right atmosphere, upon the contagious zest of crowds, upon sudden inspirations and perceptions, heightened rather than otherwise by a certain sense of pressure in space and time. To do it cold-bloodedly, in a half-empty shop, without any difficulty or competition, is as joyless as a mariage de convenance. So perhaps it was just as well, she told herself consolingly, that she had, as usual, left it till the middle of December. Wait free. Warmer. She'd get it yet. The lights changed. She put the car into bottom gear, paused, and then let in the clutch. It occurred to her as she did so that it was not only people's physical reactions to those three colors that had become automatic, but their mental ones as well. Red, yellow, green. Frustration, hope, joy, a brand new conditioned reflex. Give it a few more years to get established, and psychiatrists would be using colored rays projected in the sequence for the treatment of melancholia. To future generations, green would no longer suggest envy, but freedom. In such haphazard ways are symbolisms born and reborn. At the next crossing, red again, frustration. But somehow one accepted it without resentment, simply because it was not imposed by a human hand. One could be annoyed with a policeman, but not with a tin hollyhock. The same was true of automatic telephones. Ever since the dialing system had come in, the world's output of irritation must have been halved. It was an argument for the mechanization of life which had not previously struck her. She got home at last. Clem was already in, with his legs stretched out in front of the fire. "Successful?" he asked, seeing her festooned with parcels. "Look here," she said. "That screen wiper. I think what it says is beef tea." "My goodness," said Clem. "I believe you're right.